we're going now. I've been messing around with my sound settings a bit, so if you guys that are watching would like to let me know whether or not we've got some issues or not with the sound, like things like background noise, gain, etc., that would be appreciated. Hopefully one day I can afford to get a new proper microphone instead of just a headset, and we can actually improve the quality of the stream a bit. But I'm not too hopeful, so let's wait a little bit, then we'll get going shortly. Alright, so as you guys may or may not know, this is once again the Get Good stream. I'm Zistrel, some of you know me as Ben. Unfortunately, Tony/Toku will not be joining us this week yet. I think he's running a bit late. Hopefully he'll join us a bit later. Let's wait and see. So this week we are talking about Overlord. Now, for those of you who know me personally, you'll know that last year my friends and we came first in the UK Team League, and I think we came third in the overall Continentals, and I was playing Overlord in both of those tournaments. So I've got a bit of a track record with this deck. But honestly, over the last, let's say, 6 months or so, I've actually been waning off it a little bit because I just think it's not that good anymore. And the reason being, Blademaster Cohen, when he dropped, I wouldn't say was better in every way, but the deck was able to keep up with the current meta a lot better, mainly because it had access to guaranteed strides, it had more plussing, so you had Mabudi for your card draw, your strides were a bit better, your stride skill was a lot better, you had Nadell was a very, very strong card, so you just had more, you were able to go a bit further. Whereas the thing about Overlord is, before GBT 13, the only defining card for Overlord was Conroe, you can see here. And what he gave you was, he gave you burst countercharge instead of consistent countercharge like Nadell does. And it's kind of 50-50 depending on which one you want, and very matchup dependent. But with GBT, up to GBT 12, there was kind of no real reason to play Overlord, because both decks, Blademaster and Overlord, could use Ziegenberg both reasonably fine, and Ziegenberg is right now, I think, still the best card in Kagero. And if anything, actually, Blademaster uses it better because it has more controllable retire, so you can wipe the field more easily. Thanks, Rain1541, for following. So that's the background, precursor to it. And one thing you'll notice going into GBT 13 is that a lot of the support is now much more Overlord focused rather than Blademaster focused. Especially we've got the GR and the Triple Rare, both are Overlord cards. So what I'm going to hope for you to do today is I'm going to be able to use my previous experience with Overlord and just tell you guys sort of the various options, because I haven't actually done that much testing myself yet because I've been busy testing the Link Joker stuff. So I've got two deck lists. As you can see, there are two tabs up here. Don't know if that's high quality or not, but I've got two deck lists open. So I'm probably going to spend a bit longer than normal talking about the two of them and saying what the differences are, how they perform, etc. And then if Tony joins us late, then he'll be able to play with us. Otherwise, I'll either be recruiting someone else I know to play some test games, or maybe even I'll play some solitaire, like bring out some of my own other decks and just play against myself. So we'll just jump right into it for now, and then we'll see where we go. So with this list, you see that I'm running 8 draw, 4 crit. We've got the new High Flame, really good strike card. So I'll explain what the Japanese cards do for those of you who don't know, because the set's not in English yet, and not all of you can read Japanese, and maybe not everyone keeps up with spoilers. So the heal trigger, I don't remember her exact name, but she's a Dragon Dancer, she's a human, and when you use her to when you G-God with her, she can bind herself and another copy of herself from the drop zone to either countercharge one or Soul Charge 1. The crit trigger here, GB1, when something in the same column as him is retired, you can retire him to retire the other thing in that column. So it's kind of like Neo Flame, but it gets around resist, so it doesn't actually target, so that makes it really good. Doombringer High Flame, his first skill is when he's called to rearguard, you can choose 2 Overlords from your drop zone and put them on the bottom of your deck. If you do, choose up to 2, and then if you put 2 cards, draw a card. And at the beginning of your turn, you can just retire him to stride onto an Overlord, as in a G unit with Overlord, without paying cost for stride. Then the other Japanese cards we've got, this is Grow Heater. He's a 10k base. When he's placed on Vanguard Circle or Rearguard Circle, either you have to have a grade 3 Overlord, grade 3 or higher Overlord on your Vanguard Circle, or you have to reveal a card with Overlord in its name from hand. And if you don't do either of these, he gets minus 5k. And his other skill is as long as you have a grade 4 or higher Overlord, he gets plus 2k for each card in your opponent's damage zone. Burning Horn Evil Loot. The skill is when it comes into play, when it's called to rearguard, Soul Blast 1 and reveal an Overlord from your hand to retire something in the same column as him, and the same second skill. So as long as you have a grade 4 Overlord, he gets plus 2k for each card in your opponent's damage zone. Then we move on to the Destiny. So when you ride him, or at the beginning of your ride phase, you can Soul Blast 1, choose a circle other than the Vanguard Circle and retire it. So he can retire locked cards and he can retire resist. Then the other skill is, when your G unit strides, counterblast 1, then retire one of your opponent's rearguards, and then look it up to the top 7 cards of your deck for an Overlord and add it to hand. Then shuffle your deck. Finally, we move on to the Purge. So his first skill, let me just zoom in for you guys. So his first skill is, choose a G unit from your G zone and turn it face up. Then choose a card with Overlord in its name from your hand and put it into your soul. If you do, if your opponent has 4 or less damage, deal 1 damage to them and trigger checks are nullified. And then his GB3 is a continuous skill. He drive checks equal to the number of cards in your opponent's damage zone, so potentially 5 drive. We've got Drachma, the ZR. When he's placed on Vanguard Circle, counterblast 2. If you do, retire all of your opponent's units, Vanguard included. Then your opponent chooses 3 cards from their hand, discards 2 of them, and then rides the last one. I'll explain some of the niche bits and pieces about him later, but I'm not going to go into full depth about Drachma, but if you guys want to know a bit more about the ZR, you can watch a bunch of other videos on YouTube. Like, there's one from Solemn Vanguard and there's one from Different Fight, who talk about what they do quite nicely and, you know, sort of the interactions with them. And finally, we've got Axe End Grave. So his effect is Act, once per turn, counterblast 1, choose a G unit from your G zone and turn it face up. Until the end of turn, he gets the following effect. When he attacks, if he's blazing, draw a card and retire one of your opponent's rearguards. So not great, but instantly turns on GB2, nice to have. Slightly better than Vortex Desire, I think. So you see, for the grade 3 lineup, we're still running the Legion pair, Cross and End. So before, in the previous build, I was running 4 of the Cross, 3 of the Legend, and 1 copy of the Great, and 1 copy of... 3 Cross, 4 Cross, 3 End, 1 Legend, 1 Great. Oh, I was getting confused. So the reason we ran the Great is because we were still running Neoflame, because he gives you board control, which goes well with Ziegenberg, who you'll notice is still at a 4 of. Just how important he is, like, he's still the best stride, I think, in the deck. The Cross and the End both give you a very strong Legion option. So the actual Legion itself is a soft plus, I'll call it, because when you perform the Legion with the Cross, you can then deck search for another Cross or the End to hand, which sets up both of their Persona blasts quite nicely. Though the issue with the Cross, I find, even though we're running at 4 in the previous build, is that if you ride him, he doesn't do anything, unlike the Destiny or the Legend. But we have Conroe for that. So there's a line of play which I'll talk about later. So we're running the Destiny as a 4 of now because he's now the main grade 3. Just because he always does something. He does something on ride, he does something on stride, he does something at the beginning of each turn. So it's always going to be value. Whereas the Legend, you ran him just for the on play, because he's on play as Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 1, basically draws you a card. And then the GB2 skill to stride himself, you never use. So your game plan is ride the Destiny, do your things, and then if you need to later on, rewrite the Cross, do your Legion, and then continue from there. So you'll notice the Purge does stuff on your opponent's damage zone, and then Grow Heater and Evolute both get power for your opponent's damage zone. So the deck is now taking a much more aggressive stance, whereas the previous style of deck was a very grindy, slow style, where you just want to retire your rear guards, stride Ziegenberg a bunch of times, get a bunch of cards in hand, make them lose all their resources, and then outvalue them with your Legion loop once you've run out of strides. Whereas now, because these two grade 2s that make numbers both only work when you're on a grade 4 or higher Vanguard, you want to be striding pretty much all the time, and this Legion now is pretty much just a backup for when you have nothing left to do or you need to put heals in your back in your deck or something. The benefit to this is that you can now close out games much more reliably, but then of course the downside is you don't have a late game anymore, and some people might like that, some people might be okay with that, some people might go, oh, no way. Now, I'm going to talk a bit about some of the specific card choices here. So the first one is the trigger lineup. So you'll see we've got 8 draws. The reason I've decided to go for 8 draws in this specific build is quite simply, I think the deck needs a lot of soul. And having 8 draw triggers means that you now have triggers that go into the soul. So, like I said before, we're running the Legend. So the line of play, an average line of play I used to be able to take with the deck was, you write to grade 1, do whatever. Then you write to grade 2, you use your Conroe starter to Conroe for a Conroe, call this Conroe, reveal whatever grade 3 you had in your hand, deck search for the Legend, and then discard the other grade 3. So now you've got your correct ride guaranteed, i.e. the Legend, and you have a grade 3 in your drop zone. So what you could have done was, you could have then used the old Dragonic Burnout to Soul Blast 1, and then put the grade 3 you discarded for Conroe back on the bottom of your deck to retire one of their rear guards. And this was really good for early rush. But the issue is that that would then leave you with no soul. So when you rode from grade 2 to 3, i.e. the Legend, you'd have 1 soul, which you would use immediately on the Legend to either find you a perfect guard, a heal trigger, another grade 3, a stride fodder, whatever the hell you wanted. And then you'd have no soul, which means that if you wanted to Ziegenberg, you'd either need to re-ride or use one of your triggers, because nothing else in the deck soul charges. And again, with the Destiny, again, he soul blasts on ride, and he soul blasts at the beginning of every turn, and you're still using Ziegenberg. Sure, you've got the Purge, who puts grade 3s from your hand into soul, which is good, but you've only got 3 copies of the Purge, and I don't think you want to play a 4th. And even if you do, I don't think it's an effect you'll be using all the time, because sometimes they'll just be on 5 damage, and so there's no point using his effect, other than to neg yourself, basically. So, it's all about getting reliable soul, which is what the triggers are for. Now, some of you may be saying, oh, but there's that new grade 0 Conroe. So, there's a Conroe coming out in GBT 13, is a starter, Forerunner, and his effect is, I don't quite remember, I think it's Counterblast? Let me look it up real quick. But I know there's something to do with looking at the top 7 cards of your deck for another Overlord. Let's give us a second. Yeah, Counterblast 1, put this unit into your soul, and choose a card with Overlord and its card name from your hand and reveal it. Give me a second, I'll just try and put it up on the stream here real quick. Let's see. There we go. So, his effect, yeah, so you can read the wiki effect as well if you guys want. So yeah, Counterblast 1, put it into the soul, choose an Overlord from your hand and reveal it. Look at the top 7, reveal an Overlord, add it to hand, shuffle deck, and if you did not add an Overlord, soul charge 1. So he goes into soul, unlike the old Conroe, which retires himself, and he gives you a soul charge if he fails. But he's probably never going to fail, because in this specific list, we're playing 9 grade 3s. So that's a lot. And because we've got Doombringer Highflame to put grade 3s back on a consistent basis, I don't think you'll be finding them, you'll be missing that often. So that's why we're not running him, because you're basically never going to get a secondary soul charge. And even then, oops, let me just get rid of that. And even then, it's only a soul charge 2, and it's a one-off soul charge 2. And it just feels not really worth it when you could be using Conroe, who you will guaranteed get value out of every single time you use him. The other thing I want to talk about is the choice of PG. So a lot of people still use Protect Orb, the countercharge PG, as the PG of choice because, oh, Kagura is a very counterblast heavy deck. And they're not wrong. You've got the Destiny's On Stride skill, which is counterblast 1 pretty much every turn. You've got Ziegenberg, who's counterblast 1. You've got 2 copies of the Ace if you need it, he's counterblast 2. You've got Accent Grove, who's counterblast 1. And of course, you have the greatest G-Guard in the world, Denial Griffin, who's also counterblast 1. So the deck is fairly counterblast heavy. But if you notice, you counterblast 1 for Destiny, stride into Ziegenberg. That's a total of 2 counterblasts you'll be using. Let's say you've used Denial Griffin earlier the turn before, so you've used up 3 counterblast. Conroe still gets you there. If Conroe with Ziegenberg is an overall countercharge 3 for neg 1. So you lose a card, you lose the Conroe who you have to sacrifice, which might not be great, but if you go into Ziegenberg or the Ace with a Conroe, you will probably end your turn with all of your damage face up, which then gives you all the freedom in the world to either use Absalam, Denial Griffin, Defeat Flare, whatever you want. And that just gives you that extra bit of reach. This is what I said about burst countercharge versus consistent countercharge. The deck doesn't need consistent countercharge because you're not spamming 1 counterblast 3 times a turn over the course of multiple turns. Sometimes you will just stride into the Purge, so you counterblast 1 for the Destiny. None of the Purge's skills cost counterblast, and none of your rearguard skills cost counterblast. So sometimes you will just go stride the Purge, call out 2 Grow Heaters, and just swing. And that turn costs no counterblast, which is why I don't think you need the countercharge then. And whenever you do need the countercharge, you probably can get it with Conroe, which is because we have 4 of them. So I think there's no problem there. Whereas with Dumjid, I think when decks like Ichikashima are very popular in the game, and there's a lot of guard restrict floating around, early Dumjids can be very strong, like after first strike because he's GB1. And like I said, the deck is very Soul Blast heavy, so getting him into the drop zone for his skill is not hard at all. You can just ride him, then Soul Blast him with the Destiny, Stride, and suddenly you have a 15k shield in hand active, which can be good if you don't want to discard cards. I mean, sure, you'll always be able to afford the discard with your 4 or 5 drives with the Purge, but I think in general, keeping as many cards in hand as you can is valuable. I think the only thing I would say the downside to Dumjid is that he's only value really after the first one. Whereas Protect Orb, you can always just PG with him. Whereas you don't always want to PG with Dumjid. You kind of want to get his 15k shield value as much as you can. Though against decks like Ichikashima, it won't matter. But I think he's good to have. And as of yet, I haven't been desperate for the countercharge from Protect Orb. I think that's most of the rest of the list. You'll notice the very wonky ratios. 17 grade 0s as a standard. Then only 12 grade 1s. 12 grade 2s, and then 9 grade 3s. So some of you might be worried about, can you ride consistently? Can you get to grade 3 consistently? And that's the other reasoning behind 8 draws, because as long as you can get to grade 2 relatively stable, then you can just Conroe for your grade 3s. And from there you should be fine. That's the reasoning. Of course, we'll see how well that puts on practice, but I don't know if everyone's read it, but there's a really good article that I read a while back when I first got into Vanguard, where someone actually did the mathematics for the ideal ratios for riding to grade 3. And I think the lineup was 17 grade 0s, because that's the minimum you can have, 13 grade 1s, 11 grade 2s, and then 9 grade 3s. So we see that we've just taken that ratio and swapped a grade 1 for a grade 2. Now that may or may not be good, that may make a difference, but it's relatively similar to what people call that ideal ratio, so I think we can go with it. Just want to talk about the G-Zone a little bit more. The G-Guards of choice, we're not running the Fires Collection G-Guard anymore, mainly because he's another use of Soul that we just can't afford. We're not playing the GB8 because to play Ziegenberg, we want their field to be empty all the time, and the GB8 is counterproductive to that. So we don't need to turbo GB8 with the G-Guard anymore. And finally, with of how the game is going with lots of high power restanders, Denial Griffin is just more valuable than uh, Advanced Guard at this point, because you've got things like Wise Man, Groan, Nanase on non-Ichikishima turns, uh, any other popular deck that can basically stand their rear guard and attack you. Neonex is going to get popular, Messiah's got Metalia Messiah. These are all good targets that you just want to Denial Griffin, rather than defeat Flare, let it hit, and then it can stand again and hit you again. As much as I don't like it anymore, we're running 2 copies of the Ace, just because High Flame only works when you're striding into an Overlord, and we've only got 3 copies of the Purge, so we kind of want to make value out of High Flame. So we've got the Ace there if we need it. Some people run 3 copies of the Ace, because there is a play you can make where if you have 4 damage, you can first stride the Ace, counterblast 4, to basically use his act skill twice, because if you notice, let me just zoom in again. So it's kind of a bit blurry, but the Ace's skill, the paying the counterblast 2 and then flipping a copy of the Ace, is not a once per turn, meaning that you can use it twice in one turn to get the restand on the first stride. The only downside is that he gets to drive -1 before he gets the red text. So if you do it twice, you'll only be driving once. So you get 1 drive and then 1 drive on the restand, which is extremely not value. And I really dislike that play. And people think it's good because, oh, but you can do it with Victoplasma. But the main difference is, Victoplasma's -1 drive is part of the red text. So if you activate Victoplasma twice in one turn, you will still get 2 drive, then 2 drive. You don't get that with the Ace, and I think it's not worth it. And if you're being rushed, which is how you're going to get to 4 damage on the first stride, there's no point going for the Ace. I'd rather go for something that has a guaranteed retire. Because the other problem with the Ace is, he has to attack a Vanguard to restand. If he could restand when attacking anything, then sure, there is a slight argument where if you're getting rushed, you get rushed to 4, stride the Ace, activate it twice, swing at 1 rearguard for 26, restand, swing at the other rearguard for 31. Sure, both times only has 1 drive, so you're overall still only getting 1 card out, rather than the average 2 cards per stride. But it's better than nothing, and it stops the early rush. But then you've strode, so then there is no more early rush, like, it is mid-game at that point. So that's kind of why I don't really think it's value. The other thing you'll notice, one last thing I just want to mention is, we've still got Nihilum, even though we are relying on the Purge, and that is because, as I've said before, Ziegenberg is still one of the best cards in the deck. I think it's still one of the best cards in the clan. So, like I said, you want to... sometimes you'll end the game on Ziegenberg, and sometimes you'll end the game on the Purge. For those of you who watched last week's stream when I was talking about Messiah, I mentioned how you have to want to balance the difference between the turn where you end the game with Harmonix Neo, and the turns where you get up to that turn with your Flageolet or Basaltis. And I think that balance is eschewed slightly in Overlord, because both the Purge and Ziegenberg can end games themselves, and which one you use at any one point varies. So because of that, we are kind of hedging our bets. So Evolute and Grow Heater both are good no matter which stride you're on, as long as your opponent is on 4 or more damage. Whereas Nihilum is only really good on Ziegenberg. He's okay on the Purge, but he's less good on the Purge. But we still run 4 of him, because how good he is on the Ziegenberg turns outweighs how not good he is on the Purge turns, if that makes sense. And ideally, what you want to do is, assuming the game goes on forever and you use up all your strides, in an average game, you should only really use Ziegenberg 3 times. Because you'll stride 1, use the Soul Blast Persona Flip skill to flip 1, to get a costless restand, and then these 2, ideally, you'll have their field empty from the Destiny and Evolute and Flame Chase anyway. So you should be able to get 2 more costless restands without having to use Persona Flips. That's 3 uses of Ziegenberg, and you'll probably only get 2 uses of the Purge, because one of them will probably be flip face up for the other one. Like, let's say that you get lucky, and you ride first, G-Guard first, go straight into Ziegenberg. You can then flip an Axe Engrave to the Purge, and then flip another Purge to the Purge, because the Ace is a Persona Flip, and you kind of want to save Drachma just in case, even though you'll probably only use him 1 out of 10 games. So that's this build. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip over to the other deck, and I'm going to explain some of the differences. Maybe if I learned my streaming software a bit better, I could show you the two decks side by side, but that's not going to happen right now. So, again, we're running 8 draw, same trigger lineup, same grade 2 lineup, but this time we're only running 8 grade 3s, and instead of the Legion pair, we're running 4 copies of the Legend. And to fill up the slots, we've dropped a Conroe, and we've added 2 copies of Belog. Why did we do that? Well, first of all, we're going down from 9 to 8 grade 3s, so we're going to have 1 slot open for a grade 1, and 1 Belog is just not reliable, in case you damage it or whatever, so it's just better to have 2. And Conroe is the card you can live without, I think. If you find that you do need the counter charge, then you could drop High Flame down to 3, because again, you can only use him when you're striding into the Purge or the Ace. But I think High Flame is even more relevant in this particular build, because you don't have the Legion anymore, so High Flame is what you need to use to recycle your grade 3s, and that's really relevant. So the reason we're running for the Legend in this build is because the Legend's on ride, it gives you a card in hand, which is really, really valuable. And no matter how bad his GB2 might be, if you can get the soul without having to spam Destiny, then rewriting the Legend multiple times just to get more cards in hand, just to find your heal triggers, to find your perfect guards, to find grade 3s to stride with, it is something you can do. Because if you rewrite a grade 3 and you soul blast the grade 3, that gives you more targets for High Flame to put back to draw you more cards, which is quite valuable. And Belog is actually, so even though we didn't have Belog in the previous build, Belog is still a really good card, because it's another hand trap, it wipes their field, it sets you up for Ziegenberg. The G-Zone is mostly the same. I think the difference between this build and the other build, in the way you play them, I think just comes down to the sort of meta games you're playing against. Mainly, I think if you're up against a lot of Blade Wings, a lot of Luard, then the Legion pair becomes a lot more valuable, because you can punish their field with the cross, get your Legion off, and just play the long game if needs be. Whereas, sorry about that, if you're playing against, say, Oracle Think Tank or Gear Chronicle, where they will just try and out-hand advantage you and aggro you to death, then getting the additional tosses off of the Legend, instead of the retires of the Destiny, can be very valuable. Again, I don't think you'd ever use the Legend's GB2, because I just don't think it's very good anymore, but it is an option. And critically, if needs be, the Legend becomes grade 4, so he turns on the power boost of Grow Heater and Evolute, if you need it to. But then, if you can afford to use his GB2 skill, you should always be striding, I think. There's just no reason not to. One thing I do want to mention is the stand trigger, Inspire Yell Dragon. I think someone in the chat mentioned that very early on, but... So, Inspire Yell Dragon, for those of you who don't remember what he does, is a stand trigger, GB1. When your Vanguard becomes blazing, put this unit on the bottom of your deck, draw a card, give one of your units 5k. I think it's one of your units, not one of your rear guards. Let's double check that. Inspire Yell. So the card is very good, and I think he becomes a lot better when you have the quintuple drive of the Purge. I hate that phrase, by the way, please call it Pentadrive. Yeah, put this unit on the bottom of your deck. When your Vanguard becomes blazing, pay the cost, draw a card, choose one of your units, and it gets 5k, shuffle your deck. So, the reason that he's good is because when you are on the Purge, and you have 5 drive checks, let's say your opponent is on 4 damage, so Hive, Evolute, and Grow Heater are both getting plus 8k. That makes Evolute 17k, which then becomes 24k with a booster, which is pretty good numbers. Or it makes Grow Heater 18k, which if you use Art Peak makes him 21, which is super magic numbers. Standing that with your Purge is very, very scary, and it's very, very strong, especially because you have 5 drive checks, so you can put a crit on him as well. You're probably gonna, I think it's almost impossible for you to miss at least 1 trigger within 5 drive checks. I'll do the maths later at some point, but basically you can bank on a drive check with the Purge, And when you put 8 of your 12 rearguards are making very high columns, then you can just stand them and push just like Messiah would, or just like Oracle Think Tank would. And that's very strong. But, again, I think Soul is a very important requirement for the deck. And given the, again, this deck is what? 5 plus 8 is... Yeah, this deck is 13, 12, 8. Which, again, a good ratio for riding. But even then, like, I think you still want the draw triggers just to find your perfect guards, just to find your heal triggers. Just because these cards are now so important in your defense. Especially now that the new heal trigger is a human, not a flame dragon. So we can't even search her with the legend. Which makes it even more important to find them. And again, sure, I just said, oh, you can bank on getting a trigger with the purge. It's still technically a 1 in 4 chance. It's not actually, but you know what I mean, like, you've got 4 triggers. Like, to find a heal trigger with the purge is a very different phrase to saying finding a trigger with the purge. So, even though you've got 4, 5, 4 drive tracks on all your strides, I think having the draw triggers to find your grade 2 attackers and to find your conroe is still very important. I think if you wanted to play stand triggers, you would probably cut Gatling Claw. As strong as Gatling Claw is, he's only really going to see use once in the game to kill your opponent's starter. Like, you might use him to kill Enigmatic Assassins from Blade Wings, but almost no other deck will keep grade 0s in play. Like Luard, who relies on the grade 0 Belial and Raven, they will always go back to their deck at the end of turn. So you're never going to be able to have Gatling Claw targets beyond the first one unless your opponent makes a mistake. So I'd actually cut Gatling Claw before Art Peak, because as I mentioned, Art Peak can still make really good columns with Grow Heater, and he can make columns with Evolute if you don't have the grade 4 Vanguard. So I'd keep Art Peak no matter what, and then Gatling Claw if you want to go Rainbow. But I think going into Soul is more valuable, because the thing about Gatling Claw is, sure, you lose the Gatling Claw in hand, you cannot blast 1, and you put it into Soul to do nothing, but then if you need that Soul to do something, then I'd rather have that Soul than not having that Soul. So he's staying in there for now, and I probably will test Inspire Yell a bit more in the coming days before the deck comes out in English. And then if you guys follow me on Twitter or you're in my Discords or whatever, then you may feel free to ask me how it's going, or I may even go into a rant and spew about my opinions somewhere down the line. But for now, I'm not a fan of Inspire Yell. One other thing I wanted to mention, another option that's not listed here, is the other grade 1 that got revealed. Let me try to remember what he's called. Let me check that up real quick. So, I think the grade 1 lineup is actually very set in stone. Like, there aren't many options you can tech here, because High Flame's important, you use him to stride into the Purge. Perfect Guards are important, you don't die to Ichikishima. And Connor is important, he gives you counter charge. But I think if you really want to play a more aggressive style of the deck... Oh no, I misremember. This new grade 1 is Blade Master only. Okay, so never mind. But I think if you wanted to add, say, Bellogs to this build, where we're running the cross in the end, then again, you'd probably cut a High Flame, and then maybe you'd cut Inhalem. Just because, like I said, you've got Legions to put stuff back, so High Flame's less valuable. You want to try into Ziegenberg, so High Flame's less valuable. And Inhalem's only good on Ziegenberg turns or the Ace turns. But you mainly want to be playing towards the Purge turns, because Ziegenberg requires more prerequisites, i.e. your opponent has no field. So that's the list. Tony is still not around, unfortunately, so just to show you guys sort of how the deck runs, I will just jump into a solitaire game where I play 2 decks against each other myself, and hopefully I can convey to you guys what I mean when I say that the deck is now more aggressive rather than grindy. So let's close this. Alright, so we've got Gatling Claw again, 1 Art Peak. What does this guy do again? Is that 3k or something retired?
one of my trigger choices is the fucking really old crit that gets 3k when a unit is retired in the main phase.
Hmm.
So sometimes what happens is you need a booster to hit specific numbers. When they're on 5 damage and you've got, let's say, Glow Flame, so you've got plus 20k on Glow Flame, you retire something during the main phase, so your crit becomes a 6k booster now. So you've got 26k uh, Glow Flame.
Oh, that's not too bad, I guess.
It's just a cute card that's there that I think is better than a vanilla crit, basically.
Even though it doesn't proc on either of the Destiny's effects.
No. It's more for
Actually,
when you
let me say, let me
call
actually put it
out.
up on this on the stream. People can't see this. Whoops. All right, there we go. People can see it now. So, yeah, I guess I see what you mean. So it's what 5-7. So how's that
Yeah,
working out for you? Because the two lists I've got are both 8 draw 4 crit.
8 draw 4 crit.
Yeah, because I think you need more
Uh,
peaks and Gatling Claws for the soul, because the deck is very soul heavy. Although
okay,
after the 2 games
sure.
I've just played, it's not actually that soul heavy because you don't actually need to spam the Destiny every single turn.
Yeah,
And after the last games, I've after the last game I've actually been really thinking that maybe you just play Rainbow just because stands are really really good with
yeah,
Glow
stands are
Heater.
really good with like all your extra 10k buffed attackers.
Yeah.
So that's also a consideration. I went for the 7 crit lineup just because the earlier you can quad drive a crit on the purge, the more pressure that you put on your opponent. So if they're at 3 and then you ping them to 4 and then you threaten quad drive with crits and they don't have enough to guard everything, it's more. I feel it's more effective that if you're just to like grab draw triggers and then they can just take 1 to 5, right?
Yeah.
So that's my reasoning on the 7 crit 5 draw. 5 draw, instead of going 8-4, I went 5 draw because I do need that extra soul from the Margot clone
Yeah.
sometimes.
It also makes good columns with Grow Heater as well.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. Take the Flare Chase because sometimes you need that retire pop.
Yeah.
As for in my deck, how do I proc the 3k crit? Basically, I only have a Burning Horn.
Yeah.
Maybe sometimes I can go into
Zeke.
Zekenberg.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
So let's talk about the PG real quick, because
yeah.
I think both of my lists have Dumjid. So
Yeah. So Ben's using Dumjid. I'm using Protect Orb Dragon. To be honest, I feel like Dumjid might be better just because you get a lot of counter charge from Conroe anyways.
yeah. So you missed this, but I spoke a lot early on about the difference between this and Blade Master, and how Blade Master has consistent counter charge, but this deck has burst counter charge, because none of your rear guards actually use counter blast, right? Like
Yeah.
you'll have one turn where you spam 3 to 4 counter blasts at once, and then you turn it all face up with Conroe, ready to Griffin them the next turn. Or
Yeah.
you'll have times where like, you Griffin them once or twice, or you Abdessalam, so you use 1 counter blast. So you have 1 face down and then 2 to 3 damage face up, and then you don't actually use any counter blast during the preceding turn, other than like maybe the Destiny Stride skill and maybe Zegenberg. Like if you stride to the Purge without using Destiny Stride skill, that's a counter blaster's turn. So you don't need the repeated counter charge 1 from Protect Orb and Nadell. That's my reasoning at least.
Yeah. I actually do agree with that. There's also the opportunity of just dropping Dumjit from hand by himself for the 15k guard, and I think being able to do that to save your rear guards, Dumjit being able to save your rear guards is actually really important as well, because your rear guards are like part of the main hitters in this deck.
Yeah, you've
because
the deck now's more aggro
yeah.
rather than control.
The moment you purge them to 5, your rear guards become the key components of the deck, so you need to protect them a lot.
Plus High Flame.
Oh, yeah. So that's why I actually think Dumjid might be better, but Protect Orb is definitely not a bad option sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, it's good. It's just sometimes you won't need it. So what's up with this one Lava Flow?
The one Lava Flow is there just in case everything hits the shit. I can't stride, and basically the deck wants to stride every turn.
Hmm.
So I've got 4 of the
Let's look at the grade 3 lineup while we're here.
yeah.
So just like my second list, you've got 4 Destiny, 4 Legend, and 1 Rebirth.
Yeah, the rebirth is a cute tech that I decided to use.
I think it's a good
to,
meta call. It's a very good
yeah.
meta call.
It's, the reason why I think one of grade 3s is really good in Overlord
It's because you have Conroe.
is because you have Conroe. You can fix ride with the Destiny's stride skill. You can even kind of fix ride with the Legends ride skill. Basically, if you're against Link Joker, and you need to be able to do something. So what you can do is first stride with the Destiny, filter for the rebirth. Let's say if you get lucky. Next turn, use the Destiny skill to sack one of your own circles, if you needed to, or you can just re-ride into the rebirth, and then have options against the Link Joker.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So we'll see exactly. Plus the rebirth, you can counterblast 1, lock any number of your rear guards, and then if you have 5 locked cards, he gets 10k and discard a card restand?
Yeah. Discard 2, I think.
Discard 2, okay. And has to attack a Vanguard.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's not terrible. Alright, so I see you've cut down on the Nihilum. So this is something I was talking about earlier again you missed. So I'll just reiterate for those people who either joining later or just wasn't watching the stream at that point. So last week when we talked about Messiah, we talked about the difference between playing towards your Harmonix Neo turn, where you end the game because you only have 1 of those, versus distributing your resources to maximize the effectiveness of your non-Harmonix Messiah turns. So like for example, you're going to go into Flagellate twice and then Harmonix Neo. So because you're going to be on Flagellate more often than Harmonix, you want to optimize for your Flagellate turn, not your Harmonix turn. And then I mentioned here, you've got Ziegenberg and the Purge, but they can both end games on their own. So there's no correct answer of which one to optimize for. Like there's no right or wrong on which one you optimize for.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my list has 4 copies of Ziegenberg, and I think that, in my opinion, I still think that Ziegenberg is better than the Purge. So I'm still running 4 Nihilum to get maximum value out of my Ziegenberg turns.
Yep, I agree with that.
But you're running only 2 Ziegenbergs and 3 Nihilum. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So 2 Ziegenbergs, 2 the aces as well.
Yeah, I have the aces as well. But
so we've got two turns of strides where Nihilum gets the 10k bonus from the double Vanguard strike. Basically, I chose that because I actually found that when I played, I actually enjoyed spamming the Purge more.
Right.
Yeah. And I used like the Ace or Ziekenberg as like a last turn push.
Yeah.
So basically, it would be like generic stride, the Purge, and once they're at 5 and like I feel the chance to kill them, I'll drop one of the Nihilums in hand, stride into the Ace, stride into Ziekenberg, get the double Vanguard attack off, plus 10k to Nihilum attacks, and hopefully that's enough to like finish them off.
Alright, okay.
So instead of going from like, let's say the Purge, Ziekenberg, push again, and then the Purge for a finish, mine's more the Purge as 2 pushes, and then Ziekenberg Ace for a finish.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's just the order of how I prioritize my striding.
Yeah, so one last thing, so 2 other things I want to talk about now about the G-Zone. So you've dropped 2 copies of Ziegenberg for 2 copies of Nouvelle Vague. So talk to me about that.
It's really there for like all the Zauri clones in the world where they managed to like get all their PGs at the last second. So I could just Nouvelle Vague them, and I believe that should be able to end the game immediately.
So yeah, one thing I noticed was that the deck is now very weak to PGs, which is one of the reasons I really valued stands.
Okay.
Because stands effectively nullify PG, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you're going the other end, just going, okay, he has 3 PGs in hand because he's playing Luard, I'll just Nouvelle Vague him, and then hopefully that'll end the game.
Yeah.
My issue with Nouvelle Vague is that it still feels very weak, because like it's kind of like it doesn't get any power, so they can still just G guard it out.
Yeah, they can still G guard it out.
Yeah, which is why I'm not a fan.
That's fair as well. It's more Nouvelle Vague is there because I hadn't considered any options, and it's still there for the nostalgia factor. Back when I still had it in my Overlord deck,
Nice.
I'm a limit on that.
So the next thing then is you're still playing Blazing Burst, the GB8. Now I've
Yes.
cut him completely, and I'm playing Axe Engrave. So there are two questions to
Okay.
ask
Yeah.
here. One is, why do you still feel the GB8 is value? And the second is, do you not think Axe Engrave is worth playing?
I do think Axe Engrave is worth throwing, and I think if I was to put him into the G zone, I'd be taking out a Nouvelle Vague
Okay.
for one. And then I'd probably replace the second Nouvelle Vague with another generic card that can be used for Axe Engrave's flip.
Like Vortex Desire.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Uh,
the reason I cut GB8 from my list was because I feel that the deck is already so retire heavy. You know, it's a control deck in disguise, or rather, it's an
yeah.
aggro deck in the disguise of a control deck because it still has retire effects. So do you ever find that you're getting value off of the GB8? Like, is it something you really want to play to?
That's true. I've actually never gotten to use the GV8. First of all, I've never actually really wanted to go into GV8, mind you. Usually, if I'm at G, I actually end up going into usually ending the game before GV8. My idea is that sometimes let's take a look at one of the hot decks in the meta right now. We've got Resist Force.
Yep.
So Resist Force, I play Blazing Burst to deal with that
Hmm.
if I ever make it that far. Sometimes I don't have the resources to actually continuously retire them. Let's say all my counterblast is face down. I have no more soul on the Destiny anymore, and I still need to end them, and they're at like 5, right?
Yep.
So uh
You've got the Purge.
I've got Glow, I've got Evolute, I've got Destiny. So what I can do is Destiny, I can't use any skills to retire them. So let's say they've got 3 rear guards. Perfect, right?
Yep.
Stride into Blazing Burst, attack Blazing Burst. If they're at 5, all my front row rear guards are getting 10k already from their own effects. And then I'm getting another 10k from Blazing Bird's effect. 10k
Yep.
to the boosters as well. So obviously I'm just reading the effect right now. I'm just saying it's there as like a last ditch effort to like do a final push.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's a better last ditch effort than Drachma, but it's there for like when the resources are not there in order to push them out.
Sure. So I'm guessing that the reason you're still playing Advanced Guard is to get you to that GB8 maybe a little bit faster.
Yes.
Yeah, because I've cut my Advanced Guard for the third Griffin because I just found that
Okay.
Advanced Guard it just isn't valuable anymore in this meta. Like when you've got high power columns resounding like Natalia, like Aqua Force that doesn't have resist, and Wise Man's still a thing. I'd much rather have the Griffin than the Advanced Guard, especially on things like. I think the only time Advanced Guard outvalues Griffin is when you're facing down a Drag Strider with a Gonvar behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But that's just one edge case versus like 3 other cases where Griffin would be good, like versus a Groan.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, okay. I think I understand what your list is doing. It seems like there's a lot of meta choices here. Like I definitely like the Rebirth. I think that's a good call. And I think you're very correct in that Blazing Burst will become better once Aqua Force gains traction. The only thing I'm not sure about is the trigger lineup. But you know, now that you've said that you play in a way that you just go purge, 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 push, then I can see that crits are much better for that game plan. It's a much more aggressive line.
Yes.
Alright, so do you want to pilot your build then, and I'll try out Luard, because